Hello, everyone, and welcome to Micromobility in the City. I'd like to start by saying thank you to the host for allowing us this opportunity to talk about such an exciting topic, micromobility. Over the past 3 years, we have seen an explosion of micromobility operators within our cities across the world. And the adoption rate of this mode, both from private operators and just personally owned vehicles, has even got experts thinking, what's going to be next? But we haven't yet figured out how to operate these systems in a sustainable way. These systems inherently operate on our city streets, which means we have to work with cities to figure out how to best allocate our public right-of-way. Today, I have a group of experts with me to discuss what it's going to take to really integrate with cities and make sure that this mode is here to stay. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Marla Westervelt, and I'm the Director of Policy at the Commission on the Future of Mobility. The Commission is a coalition of business leaders and policy experts from around the world who are working to develop a vision for what the future of mobility should look like and go out there and implement it. With that, I'll give an opportunity for my panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Bose.
Hi, thank you, Marla. My name is Boaz, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pneumatic. At Pneumatic, we're focusing on understanding the rider behavior of micromobility, and by that, helping to increase the safety of the city and the riders around the city. Beforehand, for the closure, I was the founder of EcoMotion, and excited to be here.
Great, thank you. Michael.
Hello, this is Michel. I'm the Chief Engineering and Marketing Officer of Valeo. Valeo is a industrial group delivering components and systems for the automotive industry. So we are specialists in various areas such as electric motors and propulsions, and also automatic autonomous drive systems and sensors and softwares on the vehicles. So we are working mostly in the passenger car area, but we develop further into the micromobility today, because we see this as a very exciting new value space for us and where we can bring some technology from the automotive world.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Jennifer.
Hi, yep, thank you, Marla. So I'm Jennifer, I'm head of mobility at EIT InnoEnergy. We are one of the world's largest strategic investors in climate tech. Over the last 8 years or so, we've invested over 500 million in startups in Europe and also in the United States. I actually, similar to Michelle, come from the automotive world for 20 years, but now what you said, Marla, at the start, seeing the big boom in micromobility, we're doing a lot of investments and seeing a lot of action now in micromobility.
Wonderful. So we're gonna dive in with an icebreaker. So if you were gonna go out and explore your city on a beautiful day, what would be your preferred method of transportation and why? A bicycle, a scooter, or a moped? Feel free to jump in.
Personally, I'm gonna go for a bicycle.
And why?
Yeah, just because it's cool, and then you can go quick. You have fresh air blowing in your hair. That's nice, and it's not. It's easy to drive in the city. You can park everywhere, and you are free, basically.
All right.
I would also go for a bicycle. So for a couple of reasons too. I think the speed of a bike when you're riding it is quite nice to kind of take in all the surroundings around you. And even if you ride the same route every day, you can kind of see new things that you hadn't seen before. So I find it kind of a nice way to be inspired also by the environment around you.
I'm probably going to take a scooter because I'm lazy.
Well, there's e-bikes now, so I mean, you can also be lazy.
Still, you still need to pedal in order to get them started to kick in. So, the scooter, just chill out. Nice day outside, seeing the view.
Boaz, you've been working on a type of solution that tracks and rates riders' behaviors. Should a safety score become a standard on all modes of micromobility? How would that benefit city officials? How would that benefit operators? And what types of regulations would be required to actually make that happen?
Thank you. So obviously I'm biased, but I truly think that it should be a standard to have an understanding of the rider behavior. We have two of the panelists here coming from the auto industry, and we're familiar with the concept that these days, like when you have a fleet of cars or trucks, it's obvious that the operator monitoring and understanding the behavior of the drivers and help them to improve their behavior. Today, one of the biggest, I think, problem of cities to adopt micromobility is the fact that the riders sometimes doesn't behave in the way that cities are expecting them to behave, and also causing a lot of troubles to other pedestrians in the city. Having the understanding of the rider behavior helps them to improve and to learn how they can ride better, giving the city indications of the increase of the good behavior of the pedestrians, of the riders. That's something I think it's very important in the future of micromobility.
And what types of regulations would be required to make that happen? And anyone can jump in on this one.
For us, it's very simple. Like, today cities are the one who's like running the show, I may say. Even if a city will give incentive and not even, force operators to adopt that kind of technology, but give them incentives and give them the awareness of those kind of technologies, I think that's something that will increase the adoption of that kind of technology. Because not only that it's important for the city, it's also important for the operators.
I think, Marla, too, there's a couple different points where the regulations become relevant. So you have the topic what Bose is looking at right now with understanding how the riders behave, and that's really important to make sure that they're behaving in a way that's respectful for the city and the citizens. But then there's also the whole operations topic, right? How is the operations done? And that goes along with charging, but also rebalancing the vehicles. And I think the solutions such as what we see in Europe right now with the swappable batteries, but also the charge and lock stations, and finding the right combination of those that kind of keep the city also clean and have the highest efficiency with the operations in general.
On my side, maybe if I can comment further, I do believe there are several points which have been already said, but in addition, we see really a trend in the cities to go for clean mobility, and therefore the regulation relative to air pollution is extremely important today. We see many cities that want to ban thermal engines, whatever they are, for which car, whichever vehicle they are looking for, be it scooters, be it cars, be it trucks, etc. So typically we see electric and zero emission mobility coming in. The second thing is I do believe that we need to share in a different way the public space. And therefore, the automotive has taken a lot of place in the city today with parking and streets and blah, blah, blah. And we see that now with the new mobility coming in, there are some ideas to do some dedicated areas, typically for bicycle or for droids. Typically, you've seen that in some areas, the droids are not allowed to go on the basement, and they have to go in a special lane. So I do believe that the regulation in cities, they need to address it in order to make sure that this will not be mixed at all. Otherwise, there's going to be a little bit of a mess. And even though we can have some software and some detection and some sensors to monitor the behavior, and Bose was talkative on that, I do believe that there are some basics first that try to organize a little bit the city around the way we want people to move.
But I think that we need to be careful about, talking about city and regulation. We need to be very careful about it, because at the end, you don't want to create a situation when it's not worthwhile for operators to operate in cities at the end. You need to have to be keep that kind of balance between, we want to put more regulation of the behavior and understanding of the riders and creating more spaces and other things and control the parking and so on. And on the other hand, make sure that those kind of things are not making this kind of operation impossible. And we're losing the huge value of micromobility in the cities today. And we see this, we just start to see the value of those kind of services in our cities today.
Maybe there is one point, both, that could help micromobility to come quicker, that the fact that cities will forbid cars into the deep centers. And if you have no cars anymore, then you need something else. So you can go for shared mobility, whatever it is, a bus, a tram, a tube. But we've seen with the COVID that people are very keen to individual mobility, more because of safety, because of the virus. And therefore, we do believe that scooters, bikes, small cars, droids, robotaxis, all that stuff might make sense. And if cars cannot come into the city anymore, then it's really a booming pool for the micromobility.
You have my vote for that. And, we've seen what's happening in Paris as a leader in that kind of concept.
Yeah, we expect to have no car in the city, maybe between 30 and 40. We don't know yet, but all the big mayors of big cities like in London and some other areas, they are really willing to try to, maybe not to ban the car, but at least to limit the incoming of cars into the city. Big cities like the city where I'm living here in Paris are really congested, mostly by people crossing across from west to east, from north to south. And the mayor wants people to really stay in that area, and having probably surrounding expressways to go from point A to point B. There is really a pattern of mobility that is really directed by the authorities, the local authorities. I can imagine that in other cities of the world, it looks the same. I guess in New York or in LA or wherever.
Yes, I couldn't be more supportive of congestion pricing. Michelle, given your expertise in the auto industry, how can automakers contribute to the growth of micromobility, and what types of technology and solutions can the auto industry offer?
Well, I think the point is that the automotive industry is facing a real turmoil today, not only because of the COVID and the crisis, but also because we see the society is changing. So the growth in passenger car production is going to be limited in the future, probably because most of the growth of mobility comes with other ways of moving yourself. Of course, everybody was speaking about public transportation, but due to the COVID, we've seen that the explosion of new offers, alternative offers. So we see most of the car makers which are scratching their heads, so how they can tackle that problem. And they all want to invest into services which are not 100% related to the car itself. So you can see most of the big car makers are investing in mobility mass companies, mobility as a service companies, delivering car sharing capability, delivering even telephone application to find your car or your bike or your scooter, or to swap your vehicle from point A to point B according to your demand. So we see them trying to overcome the difficulty by investing in those areas. And for us, typically, we are suppliers of those guys. So we provide typically autonomous drive solution or electric propulsion for the big cars, but we do the same as well now for new mobility systems. So we are developing further into new areas of business with new customers, typically bike makers. We will do electric bike systems, scooters, robots, droids, robotaxis. All of this, we are really delivering solutions which are inherited from the automotive industry. The point maybe for you to understand is automotive industry is relatively good at providing volume production by millions, and therefore relatively low cost. And therefore, this low-cost capability could enable really the micromobility to take off quicker, because if we carry over solutions which are inherited from the big volume production of cars, we could certainly bring to the micromobility much more affordable technologies to expand quicker.
Great. And Jennifer, from your experience in the auto industry, do you also want to weigh into that?
Well, I just want to say, I think what Michelle just said, I couldn't agree with more, because when you look at, and Marla, you mentioned this at the start of the panel, how micromobility was sort of launched into the market. If we all saw the same thing, we saw the vehicles at the beginning, they were having quite a short lifetime. I mean, even at the very beginning, it was 2 months or so for vehicle lifetimes. They weren't serviceable, they weren't durable, they weren't locally produced, they didn't have the swappable battery supply, which is also key for part of the balance. And I think what Michelle said with having, bringing in the automotive industry here with those established supply chains, high volumes, multi-source, high quality products, serviceability, like all that wrapped into this product would also make a very good step towards a more sustainable product, right? I mean, you could even get into recyclability and things like that then in looking at this whole chain, which is a high unit volume, which would be turned over probably much quicker than a car. So I think the idea to combine these industries a little bit, and what Michelle said as well, I mean, it also makes sense for the auto industry to keep their eyes open left and right outside the car as the cities themselves are changing and the behaviors are changing, and to not lose out on a potential market that they could also support, like with little effort, right? So, yeah.
And I'll add to that, just like that we've seen that a lot of technologies, the trend is, you see, even for automotive, beginning it starts with airplanes or maritime, then it goes to trucks, then it goes to more luxury cars, then it goes to private cars. And I think we're going to see that trend now going down to micromobility. Michelle mentioned, autonomous driving. We'll already start seeing that kind of technologies emerging from automotive to micromobility. We started on our company, started working on ADAS solution, that vision-based, obviously getting the inspiration from automotive. So I think we're going to see a lot of technologies that implemented in cars going downstream to micromobility.
Maybe one other part too, we're talking about micromobility, but kind of another section with it that's like a cousin or next to all this is the last mile logistic vehicles, right? So they're not in this shared micromobility that maybe we're thinking about at the beginning of this panel, but those vehicles, those e-cargo bikes, those mopeds with trailers and all those different purpose-built vehicles. I can tell you from our experience, we have one in our portfolio called Ono, and it's being built with an automotive supplier, which completely changes, a lot of the risk, a lot of the serviceability, the quality, how the end customer views the product, et cetera. And it has a lot of advantages. And I hope that we see more of those kind of collaborations, like going toward the future as well.
Jennifer, I cannot agree more. I do believe that even the cargo stuff is going to be probably the triggering factor of micromobility, because you need to provide the goods into the city, and people could walk, they could take the tube, etc. But you need goods to be delivered, and the last mile delivery and all the concepts of cargo is something which is developing quite quick. And in particular, we see in the autonomous drives, what we call the droids, the autonomous droids for cargo delivery, typically for food delivery, is really going quick. Currently, we have engaged personally with a company in China called Meituan. Meituan is the #1 delivery food company in the world with 350 million customers. So you can imagine this is China. And they are currently operating robots, which are 2 meters long, 1 meter wide, 1 meter high robots, kind of Amazon box on wheels, where you can order your food, your pizza that is in the tray, and you can deliver it home. And this is very exciting because it's relatively low-hanging fruit in terms of technology deployment. You can really operate this as a start, and then learning by doing, and therefore going further. And doing this, then you put robots in the streets. You just develop the propulsion, you develop the connectivity, you develop the other stuff that goes together in order to make it safe. You can really consider the behavior of people together with the robots. And you've seen that, I think that in San Francisco, there was a law, if I'm not wrong, that required the robots not to be on the pavement in order to avoid the pedestrians. So we are learning by doing as a society. And the cargo is probably something that is going quicker because it's professional, and then you have to make it happen. While probably for people, it's a little bit of a fun or maybe a nice to have a solution compared to what they have today.
Great. Jennifer, so I know you've been working on studying last mile mobility and the potential impact cities can make if they substitute a small amount of trips with light electric vehicles. Why do you feel like we should be funding and investing in these technologies? And where should we invest and what level of funding is needed to ensure that these technologies are actually able to scale?
So kind of what we did is we took kind of an academic approach to start, and just we're looking at, of all the kilometers traveled in our cities, and we already know that more than 50% of our population lives in cities, as expected to grow. Okay, of all the kilometers that are traveled, how many of them are quote unquote short distance? Let's say 6 to 8 kilometers, and that more than 60% of those are short distance trips. And so then it begs the question, okay, what percentage of those trips could be done with a different vehicle besides a car? And what type of vehicles would we even need? So that's kind of how the start of this whole study went. And already, if you look at today, even though we see a lot of these vehicles out there, it's still a very small percentage of all the trips done, like less than, it's less than 0.5% easily of all the trips that are done. So we have a huge opportunity here. And so we did the calculations to say, okay, if we were able to have more purpose-built vehicles, so you could take groceries, you might be able to take your kids. It could be also for people who maybe have a handicap. They were available when you need them and where you need them. They were all the different parts about being more serviceable and durable and maybe more locally produced, and all this. What kind of impact would it have on sustainability? And so when we did this calculation, it was pretty significant. So it was about 30 million tons of CO2 that you could save. You could also, we used data from TomTom and INRIX on the congestion and did projections. Okay, if you're not spending 20 minutes of a 1 hour commute sitting in traffic now, what is the value of the people's time? And so there's actually an impact on the GDP. There's an impact on space, what Michelle said earlier, because the cars, they do take up such an enormous amount of space. And yeah, so I think at the same time, what we also looked at is job creation. So kind of to Michelle's point, I mean, creating all these vehicles here in Europe or the US or wherever, but outside of just Asia today, also creates a new opportunity for job creation. So in there, we calculated about 1 million direct and indirect jobs. The auto industry today is about 13.8 million jobs in Europe. So it's a significant amount, but it just makes sense. And regarding your funding question, I think this field is a little bit special, right? Because we have huge VC plays. So we have, some of these players who just have hundreds of millions or even are doing SPACs now, and we've all seen that. And then we kind of have the rest. And I think what I see in this investor space is that we really need support in Europe to go into this commercialization phase, this growth phase. And that would be the part where we would need partners like Valeo or other automotive suppliers that can jump in and help doing this production scale up, and partners in the whole supply network and service partners and all that, but the investments as well that connect to all that to really get them to the scale, because it's a scaling game, it's a fast game. And that's where, yeah, if you don't have those big checks from the VCs, it's a hard game to play in.
If I may maybe add up, Jennifer, on what you say, I do believe that there is one key factor, which is affordability of the vehicles that are going to be used. Because most of this smart mobility, which has been starting in the last few years, was made out of, I would say, traditional cars or a little bit revamped, and they are just too expensive for a fleet operator. And we've seen most of the fleet operators going bankrupted just because they were not capable to do money enough due to the TCO, which was not good with the value of the vehicles. Typically, when you look for electric vehicle with a big battery, which costs already $10,000 or $15,000 each, then you have an issue to get a good TCO. We are already advocating at Valeo on a small light mobility using vehicles on purpose, which are really devoted to the city, and that could be designed with an affordable concept, meaning really low power, small battery. You don't need a big battery when you do 15 kilometers. You do something small, but you need an infrastructure around. You need a system. You need charging stations. So that's a different pattern than the pattern we traditionally use for the typical automotive industry, where you have big SUVs going on the highways and with gas stations every 50 miles. That's a very different way we have to consider this city economy. And for this, you need really low-cost solutions. If you don't have low-cost solutions, no operator will have a payback in a proper manner. So why we do believe that this synergy across the industry might be really helpful in order to bring solutions on the market.
Great. On that note, I will ask my last question in our last 5 minutes or so, which is, what does integration between operators and cities really mean? And what do we need to do to get there?
Maybe I'll go here. I think that integration between cities and operator are the most important thing right now, because without the consent of cities to operate in their property, basically on their streets, it's impossible for the operators to operate there. And I think for the cities to collaborate with the operators, it's also super important, because we've seen that this is like the solution of micromobility are super important for the goals of most of the cities, to reduce congestions, to reduce pollution, to help people to move from one place to another, to have more accessible kind of transportation and so on. And it's sort of like a kind of a symbiotic relationship. And I think that more of those two entities will work together in order to bring good solution and reliable. I think reliable is the most important thing for the customers in one hand, and on the other hand, to make sure that it's not harming other pedestrians or other users of the road. I think we're going to see more and more adoptions of those technologies around the cities.
I would maybe just add to that, Bose, and say, in addition, between the integration of the cities and the operators, I'd like to see the integration of like the citizens or the mobility data of the citizens, because I'm actually sitting in Stuttgart, Germany today. When the scooters first came here, there's so many blockout zones, and actually zones that you need to get through to get somewhere else, right? And so I think it's also important to include the citizens in the discussion on understanding where they would go, what are their use cases, where does this bring the biggest value, so that in the end you have a solution that's tailored for a high utilization and really creating the step change, I guess, that you want to see.
All right, Michel, we'll let you wrap it up.
Well, I think it's a very exciting time, because we're really at crossroads now. The automotive industry and the transportation industry has been relatively conservative for years and decades, and now we see really from now few years the situation changing a lot due to the society, due to the ban of ICEs, due to whatever we were talking about, due to the internet connectivity and the capability already to bring services. So my point is there are a lot of opportunities, and we are very excited, because we do believe that we have a story to write, which is still to be written, with a fantastic bunch of opportunities, not only on the products themselves, but as well on the services, on the infrastructure, and all of this for really turning the city a little bit better than it is today. So we are very, very excited with that.
Wonderful. Well stated. Well, thank you all so much for joining this panel, and thank you to EcoMotion for hosting us today. And have a great rest of your conference.